Hello, everybody. Welcome to the National Parents Union Nightly Restorative Check-In. Happy Monday. I am your host, Marisol Quevedo. As always, I am the very, very, very proud wife to Daniel, the mother of Camerina, Emilia, and Sofia. I am the daughter to Irma Navran. I am the grandmother to Isabela Luna, Cynthia Ileana, and Lorenzo Martin. And I am the granddaughter to Carmen, Alejandro, Camerina, and Francisco. Sorry. I mixed up my grandparents a little bit, but that's okay. And I am coming to you live from San Diego, California, where I was born and raised and where my mother was born and raised. We're a second generation native San Diegans. And I always introduce myself in that way as a reminder of who I am, where I come from, who I'm responsible to, and who I'm responsible for. And so it's always with a lot of a lot of centering and grounding that I introduce myself in that way. And I always thank you for the opportunity to do that. So today's Monday. Life has been insane. On Friday, the book that I wrote on restorative practices was released. It was a really beautiful day. And as I've shared before, I've really been working on honoring the moments of joy and celebration and accomplishment. And so, I worked on Friday. And so there was a lot of balance. There's a lot of balance happening, I will say, in life. It's been really beautiful it was very scary the night before, because I knew the book was going to come out. The night before, I was really scared. And I literally was like in a little cave in my room. And the cave was like dark. But I think part of that is just those demons that I have been battling and that I've talked about that have to do with my self-esteem and all of that. But what I'm proud of is that I still made the commitment to enjoy and celebrate and do that very genuinely. And what has been really beautiful is that my family, like my dad's sisters who are in their 70s and 80s, they sent their kids, my cousins sent me pictures and videos of them and the pride that they had in holding the book and reading it. And one of my aunts, she was so happy to see that I kept my maiden name. And it's so important. And again, like what I say in the beginning of the show about when I say the names of my people, right? It's not about me. And so just so beautiful to have this event, like have this book come out and remind me, right, that this work is not about me. It's about the past, the present, and about the future. And that's so much bigger than me. So anyway, thank you for the moment to talk about this. Okay, so we're going to do the 4-7-8 breathing technique. Now, so I read up on the 4-7-8 breathing technique, and there's a couple of things that I'm sure Dr. Anjali told me about, and I forgot. But one of them is that you're supposed to have your tongue kind of on the back of your, just resting up on top between your gums and your teeth. And this is a really great technique to calm anxiety. It's really, really known and used to calm anxiety, which is why I think it's so calming and grounding. And so we've been doing the technique right, but that was just except for the tongue thing. So I just wanted to bring that up. But I was reading, article after article. It was fascinating. So we're going to do our technique, and then we're going to talk to our guest. So if you could please join me, put your feet firmly on the ground if you like to close your eyes. And we're going to expel all of our breath. And then we're going to inhale, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, release, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Inhale, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, release, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Inhale, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Release. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Inhale. 2, 3, 4. Hold. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Release. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Okay. Thank you. I'm going to bring my guest on. Super excited to have my dear friend with us, Mr. Viet Mai. So Viet, like I told you, and I know you've seen the show before, but I always have my guests introduce themselves. And then we just talk. We just have a beautiful organic conversation. Really quick, you know what's funny? Maritza, I just have to say hello to Maritza. When I was doing the breathing technique, Maritza, I was legit thinking about you. So, hermana, I'm so happy that you're here with us. Okay, sorry. Go ahead, introduce yourself. Tell us who you are, what you're about, what you're not about, what you love, what you don't love, where you're from, where you're not from, anything that you would like.
Sure. Thank you. Well, first of all, it's an honor to be in this space with you. I've been following a lot of some of your talks, and they really speak to this restorative part that I also am exploring. My name is Viet Mai. I was born and raised in San Diego, California, also Kumeyaay land, as I know it now. I am the son of Mai Mai Dong Tan and Nguyen Thi Liu. And those are my parents from Vietnam. And I was a first generation Vietnamese American. And so in that, I've been exploring my identity through pop culture, through our educational system, and even through community work, and even being an educator myself and helping young people explore their identities as well. Through poetry, I am a spoken word artist, and I have used that gift of language in order to communicate greater concepts and topics around social justice, social innovation, and social impact. I am deeply moved by the uh, string of events that led us to where we are now, and namely the topic of Stop Asian Hate in the greater context of really addressing some of the ailments in our society that kind of hinder the process of us as people moving forward. So I am grateful to be here with Marisol once again because I know she and I were colleagues once upon a time at a high school, and a lot of these issues that we will be talking about today, I believe, kind of stem from what who we are as educators in this society, and that goes beyond the school system. So I'm looking forward to this. Thank you for having me.
Well, I'm so happy that to be with you. Anytime I get to share space with you, Viet. And earlier you had said that you've been exploring like the restorative way. And I think, just what you ended with, like the things that you care about and the things that we talk about, it's because they're a part of who we are. And not just because we're educators, and not because like it is legit a part of who we are. And I think that's what I really appreciate about I think like in this time, in this age, the how we strive for authenticity. And I think that striving, like that old kind of way of being, is that you're one way at work, but you're one way, like you're one way with your friends, you're one way, but no, like you're just your way.
Right.
And who you are in all of your ways, the like social justice, I think really also being a servant, like supporting others and elevating others, are things that are just the core of who you are. I could feel, I think also when you said your parents' names, I immediately thought about what happened in Georgia, and I could see it in your eyes. And I think it's something, like you talked about, like South Asian hate. Can you just talk from your experience and what it's been like for you navigating this country, this land, as a the son of Vietnamese immigrants.
Well, I have trouble identifying myself as in, well, I introduced myself as first generation Vietnamese American, and with that, I think the emphasis is on first generation. It is this process of exploring what it means to be a Vietnamese American. Um, I I think I have identified myself as Asian American at some point. I've identified myself as Vietnamese at some point. I've identified myself as American at some point. And I realized that I don't necessarily fit into any of those singularities.
Mhm.
So the process of me learning about who I am entering this birthday season, so Aries, um, and it is an interesting time in my life when I look at the time I spent working in education for over 20 years, so half of my life, right? And then what is the next half of my life going to look like? And so with that, this idea of exploring identity in my personal experience has been a struggle because I was raised to think that, I am American. And that is what the assimilation process teaches us, is that we are all American, land of the free, home of the brave. And as I continue to do work in education, we learn that there's a thing called the achievement gap. And the achievement gap tends to show through data that poor and Black and Brown communities and students with disabilities or English learners, these are the subgroups, right, that we use as data points in our educational system. It continuously shows that the disparities are with those who are in the margins or the disenfranchised or those who may not as readily identify as American as the stereotype of what even America is. So for me, my identity goes beyond any of those descriptions that I just said. First generation Vietnamese American. To me, my identity also is a poet, is a hip hop head, is a wannabe backup dancer. Like these are things about our identity that I don't feel that are talked about in a more normalized way. I think we are living in a highly politicized society. I think we are living in a highly polarized society. And I think there's something to be said about the cultural blend that we share as American people, as a world of people. And I'm excited to say that, we have opportunities now to define what that means as a global citizen or even as a digital citizen, right? So that's exciting to me, as well as really looking at kind of the root causes of why identity is such a tricky topic.
So how, like, what are what has been your experience with your what has been your experience? What am I trying to ask? Like, what has been your experience in, like, getting to your identity? Like, what is the process, and what is the difficulty that it is that you're having? So I know the things that you've mentioned, that, like, there's these outer forces.
Right.
So I'm wondering about the inner work.
Yes. So growing up, the assimilation process was very, very real in our school system. And so I started going to school in, I want to say 1984. It was preschool. And, 1985 was kind of first, um, kindergarten. So I remember um, losing the Vietnamese language. I just knew at some point Vietnamese was my first language, and then at some point, uh, English became my dominant language. And the idea that we were to speak English at home in order to better assimilate and as better students, right? To become better students. We know now, even in the professional setting, that that's false, right? Young people have the ability to absorb multiple languages and then have the ability to understand the difference of when to use which, right? So language in itself is something that we're always exploring as people, whether we know it or not, whether we label it or not. And so when I say language, I'm not just talking about world languages like how we communicate in English versus Spanish versus um, uh, French, even, right, or in Vietnamese, right. I'm also talking about the language of culture. Even as educators, we have a jargon, right? People in the medical profession, they have terminology, and even in the social justice, world or setting, there is a language attached with that as well, in which we all are exploring. And so when I realized that me trying to become more American meant stripping away my Vietnamese identity, it became a conflict for me. And so me trying to be American in the teenage setting was about learning how to navigate the racial differences, the diversity that I was presented with in middle school. Uh, it became very cliquish, where you had your Asian groups, you had your white group, I'm going to say, lack of a better term, Mexican groups, and your black group, right? And so some of that division became very apparent to me when there would be fights after school, and it would be one group versus another. But for some reason, I was able to navigate my middle school experience and understand everybody, like really fit in, or feel like I belonged in the circle that I belong. And so this is the difference. There's this idea that we have to fit in versus the idea that we already belong. And so I've been having that conversation a lot with people, and it's very powerful. And the concept comes from Brene Brown, so it's not anything that I made up, or it's really me learning from other people of what identity even means. So even to this day and age, as I continue to teach young people, I still look for tools to help them understand their own identity as well as my own. So hip hop culture became one of those things that felt like I could belong in American society, right? It gave me street cred, it gave me clout, like just because I knew the lyrics to a rap song, it gave me some sort of a status. It made me feel less foreign, right? And so that's the kind of identity I feel like our young people are looking for in America, especially if they come from immigrant backgrounds. So um, even moving forward into high school, the same kind of uh, you know celebration of hip hop culture, participation in it, learning how to dance for the first time, things of that nature that just gets us kind of more into this, like, okay, we're all teenagers in America. But then when I got to college, I learned that my identity as an artist came alive. The identity of being able to use my voice to vocalize my identity became such a powerful tool. I was ingrained with this idea that my identity was one of the hard sciences, math and 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 science, right? Or biology. And so this identity that I was being pushed into to work into the hard sciences, right? But I found my social identity in the language arts, in the social, in the humanities, in the cognitive science. Those parts of me started to emerge as I became more of an artist that I never thought was a part of my identity. And then it became a huge part of my educator's identity and the ability to teach math, but also through creative channels. right? Like poetry and freestyling at lunch hour, right? In the back office at the Mac Community Charter School, right? So these are these experiences that allowed me to not only own my own identity for myself, but as young people were looking at me as a person of authority or as their teacher, right? They are constantly looking for how does this person identify and how do they identify with me as a student, right? So that dynamic is always happening as well. And so the public identity became somebody that I had to look out for. This Viet, the poet, right? The person who was in the community doing rallies and street fairs and open mics and the nightlife. That was all. That's a part of me that I never thought existed as well. And as I kind of embraced it, all of a sudden there's this who is Viet Mai, right? Um, and so I'm still trying to explore that as I make my transition into my career, right? Becoming self-employed, becoming a business owner. Then we talk about branding and how your company brand is separate from your personal brand. And, this is the struggle of really not having well, this is a struggle of being a first generation from immigrant uh, uh, background. That's if I hopefully I covered a lot of the spectrum.
What I appreciate when you said the word assimilate, I immediately thought about like the process of decolonizing yourself, right?
Right,
Because part of that assimilation. And I love the way like your evolution of identity and of self, how it came through words, how it came through like how it came
right,
like with the music, but really the like through words. And you talked about language. And basically it sounds like the educational stripped you of your home language, right? Like,
yeah,
yep, that one's not for you. And when you talked about, the this is supposed to be the land of immigrant, like this is supposed, all those supposed to's, right? Like the dream of America, that you realize is such a blatant lie.
right, right,
No, but and I could see, like, I absolutely like see how your family would want you to speak English, because the same thing, happened. I would hear that story. I heard it so much growing up and going to college, of people who were stripped of their Spanish language, coming from Mexico or other Latin American countries. So the it's so amazing to me that like what you were stripped of became your power.
right. Exactly. And I think that's something to dig into a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, for me, I realized that language is powerful.
Mm-hmm.
I For 18 years, I really didn't think I was good at English, right? Just the subject as it is presented in school. And even in my first quarter, I had to take a remedial writing class through San Diego Mesa College, right? They had an instructor, but it was a community college credit in order to be able to take the university level writing course. So even in that, it was like I can't write, right? Like that was the message that was ingrained in me. And as I began to explore um, the creative aspect, the open mic, the freestyle, the free write of poetry, free verse, anyways, of spoken word, and there were no rules to free verse spoken word. It was really, write how you speak. I was even checked by one of my classmates when my writing really was more like rapping and it was more like West Coast gangster rap. And my classmate said, "What do you know about that?" And I said, I don't, right? Like it just sounded cool because during the mid '90s, gangster rap, West Coast gangster rap was in. And so culturally, I understood like it, 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 I understood that it was real and fake at the same time, right? It's like wrestling, strictly for entertainment purposes only. But as I got into college, I mean, I understood the deeper understanding of what gangster rap is all about. But aside from that, I'm saying that I saw the power in language when I found my own voice through poetry. And it's not traditional writing, it's not academic writing.
Mhm.
However, I saw how the presentation of feelings, emotions, and experiences became more of a connecting tool than me knowing how to teach math. And so, for me to make that connection as a person who does want to connect people, um, I ran with it. And I am thankful that there were people who supported me and encouraged me through that process. And they still do, right? So being an artist or being somebody who is constantly trying to improve myself and the world around me, uh, we have to keep learning. We have to keep learning the tools to connect with one another. And I'm seeing that it's always evolving. The narrative may sound the same, but we have an opportunity now to write our own narratives, and that's what's promising to me.
I think again I was just so struck at at the way that even like in your like just how it's been through the process of language that you're getting closer and closer to
Yes,
like really getting to your own identity,
right,
right? And again like it and again like something that was taken from you in a very big way. You know, when your home language is taken from you when you're little, like there's a huge cultural aspect that's taken. And then also the way that in that evolution that it's being used to connect with others. And I cracked up a little bit because you said, you know, like you know how to teach math. And that's the thing though, right? Like that's the assimilation part. Because
right,
somebody taught you how to teach math, but who said that you shouldn't be teaching math through the spoken word? Like, do you know what I'm
right.
saying?
Yes,
Like,
right,
like what?
right.
Like, what is that? Like, what is that that we bought into? That was the way to teach math. Um, and so, like, how fortunate your kids were to have you. How fortunate your students are to have you. Absolutely. Can you talk a little bit about the work? Okay, wait. Before we go, I know I'm hoping that you're gonna bless us with some of your words. Do you want? When would you? Yes.
Yeah, I have several poems, so I don't know how many you want me to do.
You
Let's
can.
see.
This is your hour.
Okay. Well, let's do that poem about the teaching math and problem solving. I think that's an appropriate poem for this kind of piece that we're in. And then there's another one that does talk about the assimilation, um, and we'll get a little more into that family dynamic a little later. So this is the poem that I wrote when someone asked me on MySpace, right? MySpace,
Woo.
if I was a teacher, and I thought about it, and I said, okay, I have a concept for that, and I wrote this poem, um, and it became one of my claim to fames in the poetry world and even in the educators world. So a lot of people ask me, "Hey, Viet, what do you do?" And I used to tell them, "Well, I teach math." But since that didn't quite sum it all up, I also add that I don't just teach math, I teach problem solving, affecting what's causing it, logic, probability. Like, what are the chances that blacks and Latins get educated? Probably doesn't stand a chance to get incarcerated. Stats, but not accurate. I took one class and that was it. Optimization broken down into three courses, 101A, B, and C, like the efficiency of education, medication, and world peace, geometry and measurement, figuring out what shapes and sizes fit in our domain and range of how high you can go up the y-axis and how low you will go before you hit the negatives. Algebra. What the heck is X and why is that over there? What's missing? What are you trying to find? Well, I'm just trying to get paid, but there's not enough information given these days. So, because inequalities, obviously only go one way. So are you less than or equals to? Are you making money or linearly, an hour's work for an hour's wage, or exponentially? Because I just put another K in my 401k. So I say functions are just like parties. The more you put into one, the more you get out of it. But the inverse can also be true. You just got to know the right formula. But don't heat it up too hot, or you might burn the baby's tongue off. And see, how does a mother go to school and work at the age of 16? A squared plus B squared equals C squared. But to undo why she's scared, you got to find that root canal is split into two unequal parts for no health insurance. It's going to make that problem kind of hard. Stuff like fractions, decimals, percents are tricky because the more press people you have in the denominator, it's actually worth less of a whole, especially if the numerator is kept low. So move the decimal point over to the right if you got more, and to the left if you got less. Got it? Como se dice decimal point en español? What did you call me? Oh, punto. Mueve el punto de derecha si tienes más y de izquierda si tienes menos. ¿Entiendes, Mendes? Fractions are just like division problems, and division is just the opposite of multiplication. You see, being divided doesn't produce anything. It's a quotient, not a product. Well, quota says ADA needs to be at least at a minimum rate, but the rate of raising gas prices, it's nice to stay home with no fuel for the ride, right? Snack time, right before nap time. All right, I'm lying. I only work with kids from kindergarten to college. I mean, students. No kidding. I do counting to calculus, college bound, and just getting off the ground. You see, I don't just teach math. I'm Mr. Viet. I teach problem solving.
Yeah. I wanted to highlight on you, so I was over here. Yes. So I've heard you perform that live, and I have seen, so this, I just got to tell you what I love. I love that, and you had said it earlier, that your spoken word is very much like how you talk. And I had, like spoken word, I feel like it's at one point there was this kind of like this thing with it that wasn't necessarily the way we talked, but the flow, I love that. And there is a line that I don't know why. I took it. Like it was something like we're always less than or equal to, but never greater than.
Yes. Inequalities obviously only go one way. So are you less than or equals to? It's the math language as it applies to problem solving, like social justice problem solving, was astounding when this piece kind of came to me. And that was the aha moment that I knew what it meant to be an educator. Mm-hmm. I was able to empathize deeply with all my fellow educators, whether they're a teacher, whether they were support staff, whether they were administrators. We were all in the game to solve problems for young people. And it wasn't just about curriculum. It was about how do we help this young person get to their next level in life. And I always took that idea and that question with me, no matter who I was in front of and what context it was in, whether it was in the classroom or on a stage at a street fair. And so I saw the power of just doing that poem. I saw the power of writing more poetry that linked a lot of things that we were familiar with as people, and then the things that we weren't really learning in traditional education. And so I just wanted to kind of give some sort of a way of bridging that gap, right? When we talk about achievement gap, it was like, okay, well, this is curriculum and this is life. What's that piece where the curriculum doesn't have to be so colonized? We talked about decolonization. So for me, education is so much more than school. I think school is just a formality at this point. Education, true education, is really in these kinds of conversations that we're having today, right? These conversations that we have at happy hour with our homies because we're frustrated with the microaggressions that happen in the workplace. And so we're going to talk about it when we get together at 6 o'clock, right? Over Taco Tuesdays, right? It's that idea of breaking bread, right? It's that idea of getting together and really understanding each other's um, experiences. And that's what it is. It's a storytelling component that we as people, we kind of help each other. We're each other's counselors. We're each other's therapists. We're each other's friends, right? And we're each other's support system in the working space sometimes. And so I don't lose sight of those types of relationships. So when they say keep your personal life and work life separate, well, why do we go to happy hour afterwards?
Mhm.
Right? I don't even drink, but I still go to happy hour because of the camaraderie, right? So those are those things where I see as relationship building. How do we do better in the work that we do and as we are as people?
I I haven't put up too many comments, but first of all, hi mom, to my mom. She
Oh,
doesn't, and I love that she is enjoying you and who you are. And Jesse Allen, I think, was on earlier, and I just didn't get a chance because I was so enthralled with the conversation. You know what I love about what you talked about with your with 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 the work, right? Of
yeah.
problem solving, like we're going through problem solving. Is I did a training today on inclusion, equity, and diversity, and was breaking down like what diversity is. And like there's the cognitive diversity, right, which is exactly what you're,
Right. Yes.
which
I
is
can talk about that.
like we all, well, go ahead, talk about it.
Well, okay, so that's the part that I feel like most organizations are missing the mark on. When you say cognitive diversity, I interpret that as diversity of thought,
Mm-hmm.
right? And how do you have diversity of thought? Well, I think it has to do with diversity of exposure, a
Mm-hmm.
diversity of experiences, diversity of problem solving,
Language.
language, right?
Mm-hmm.
Language, diversity of um, you know, struggles, right? Because with these different experiences, we're able to look at situations differently than somebody who maybe in a room that is not diverse. So you only have diversity of thought if you have diversity of experiences.
Mm-hmm.
And typically, you have a diversity of experiences when you have diversity of demographics, right? So a group of people uh, that were raised in an upper middle class environment are going to think like upper middle class people,
Well,
right?
but that goes into identity diversity also. So that's
Right,
where
exactly,
the merging happens.
right.
Yes,
So
carry on.
we have, yeah, so we have the part that people miss the mark on is the inclusion part,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so where companies are trying to mark the diversity box, right? Because they have a black person running their D&I department. They have a woman on the board, and they have a brown person in management, right? All of these things that they're checking off these boxes. But if
Mm-hmm.
those people don't have voices or they don't have agency to also have to represent the people that are also a part of that diversity, then you don't have inclusion.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so just because there's a seat at the table for diversity, is the inclusion piece there? Is the Are people able to express their viewpoints or their ideas or even their discomforts about things that are put on the table? Are they able to safely um, challenge the status quo and think innovatively, right? If the company or the organization wants to be innovative and really be inclusive, then are they providing space to actually include these voices that have not historically been expressed or represented? And if the answer is yes, then great. You guys know what you're doing. If the answer is no, then how do we have that conversation? How do people how do people provide space for others to really have constructive dialogue and disagreements? Because disagreements are not they can be healthy if used correctly, right? disagreements and difference of opinions and ideas, we cannot be afraid to share ideas. However, we are, and that's the problem, right? There's this lack of acceptance of other people's thoughts, and so oftentimes people don't want to speak up. They don't want to use their voice because it's a hostile situation when they do. So when we talk about microaggressions, when we talk about confirmational biases, cognitive dissonance, right? So maybe a manager might say, okay, yeah, I'll have an open door discussion, and everyone's welcome to give their feedback. And then somebody says, a woman may say something like, can we watch the language? Like, it feels a little too flirty in the workplace. Well, I didn't really mean it that way. I was just joking. It's just a joke, and that kind of response, that kind of dismissal of when people are expressing what their concerns are, that's the part that often misses the mark. So that type of training and awareness of how do we include all voices and really hold space for them, right? That is like that is right there a core piece of the puzzle, and people need to have an honest dialogue if that space is being provided.
I think it's what you're describing, the inclusion, like that's the meaningful, like being a meaningful decision-making voice.
Right.
And part of what, like, I think just everything that you're talking about, educational systems do exactly what you're talking about. Not all of them, but I have been in educational systems that talk the talk, but do not walk the walk. And so, like, we talked about that cognitive dissonance. Oh, yes, we're open to da-da-da. Shut down. Shut down. And I think that's why, like, I get what you say about like education, the system is the thing that has oppressed and has harmed, but it's education in the like the practice of being educated. In Spanish, we use the term like ser educado, or tiene educación, that person tiene educación. It's a combination of manners, which is really a combination of like this person knows how to walk in the world in a respectful way. And knows how to honor themselves and others. That's what being educated or ser educado means in Spanish. And I think that's a part of what you're talking about. It's that way in which we walk and treat each other, and that's part of the education. Along with I love the way you broke down like the diversity of thought and exposure and needing to have that, and how it's so connected to the identity. Oh my gosh, yes, there was so much. So much. The other thing that you had said with disagreements, we shy away from them. We don't deal with them. But we have them. We are human beings. It's just like harm. We will hurt each other. We are human beings. We will cause harm. We will be harmed. We will disagree. And part of, I think, being educated or ser educado is how do you manage that? And part of, I think, when you talked about solving problems, solving conflict, how do you engage with others when there is a conflict? And how do you resolve it, right, in a way that is respectful of you and them and of the situation in your work? And I think that's another space of our education that we need to move towards.
Absolutely. There's an image that I want to share, and I just need time to pull it up. But what I've learned is that our communication styles are not very well known. Like, I was just watching a documentary or a film on personality tests, and it's like the dark side of personality tests. And it was really interesting because even in those tests, there can be bias in how those tests are used in the workplace for screening. So, we're all familiar, if not, and most people are familiar with the Myers-Briggs assessment. And so when a company uses those tools to screen for their hiring, it becomes problematic, right? Because then we are saying we highlight certain personalities over others, and which is a form of discrimination. Um, and so one of the other things that we can look at is conflict style, right? Or there's many different kind of personality frameworks or archetypal frameworks. But one thing that I found pretty fascinating was intercultural conflict style inventory, and that's a long title for something that essentially says how do you deal with conflict? How does one deal with conflict, or how does a group deal with conflict? And there are four different quadrants, and it really comes down to two questions. Um, are in dealing with conflict, am I emotionally restrained or emotionally expressive? Right. So that's one question. The other question is, am I a direct communicator or am I an indirect communicator? So an example would be for direct communication. Um, it's just very straight to the point. I imagine like a doctor giving a diagnosis to a patient or a family, right? You can't beat around the bush there, right? You can't get too uh, figurative in your language, right? Like it needs to be pretty literal. In addition, if a person is emotionally restrained or expressive, so let's take this doctor, they are typically emotionally restrained. So that's that kind of accommodate, that's that discussion style of conflicts. And this is a person that doesn't have room to deal with the emotion. Like they can't present this information with emotion. So if I'm a doctor and I have to give a diagnosis or unfortunately bad news to a family, I'm not going to be emotional in presenting that information, right? That can do stuff to people in that sort of tension or conflicting space. Um, then let's take direct communication and then move over to emotionally expressive. So somebody who is a direct communicator and emotionally expressive, they might speak with their hands and they're real vibrant in their language, and they're like, let's get to the point, right? Like, give it to me straight, and let's get some emotion behind it, because that I'm passionate about this, and you're gonna believe it because it's passionate. It's truth and passion, right? Just truth and being able to be vulnerable with our emotions. So then you get to the part that's uh, we're not communicating directly. So this is someone like me, right? I may try to find metaphors to bridge try to speak more in grander terms so that hopefully in the ballpark you understand what I'm saying. I may I may be shy away from emotion because it can be seen as threatening, right? I may have experience with conflict in which emotion became violent. And so therefore I'm like, okay, slow down on the emotion part because it's too much information for me to process. I just need to know, you know, what you're trying to convey in words. Um, and then and then with somebody who's an indirect communicator and emotional, that's frustrating because it's like I have something to tell you. That's the person that's like, hey, what's wrong? And they'd be like, nothing. And it's like it that doesn't match, right? So it's indirect communication, but their body language is telling you something else. So those are the four different types, and as a group starts to understand who is where in the group setting, then they're also able to say, okay, there's conflict here. Um, how do we deal with this in a way that we're not being judgmental of the conflict, but
Mhm.
just understanding where the conflict's coming from, just based on our style of dealing with conflict. That was a lot, but basically, I look at how we talk about conflict, and are we able to address it in the moment rather than saying we're going to disagree. And when you say, let's just agree to disagree, that means we are not willing to change perspectives in order to understand, in order to listen for understanding. And that's the thing about diversity of thought. We have to understand that multiple truths can and do exist.
Mhm.
Your truth is your truth,
Mhm.
and it's possible that it might not be my truth, which is my truth, right? Um, so and it comes back to this idea of opinions. Even I might think that my favorite color is blue, and you might think your favorite color is orange, and that is both true. But why are we going to agree to disagree,
Or
right?
argue
That
what the best color is.
exactly. So we have to be able to look at disagreements and say, is this even something to disagree on? Or if this is a disagreement, is there something that we can find that is agreeable? And there are exercises, there are tools for these things. So I definitely, love being able to help curate that space. I've been doing facilitation work uh, all my life, pretty much ever since even I was in high school. I saw what workshop facilitation looked like as somebody who was was trained on how to recognize diversity and prejudices as a 14-year-old. And so I was fortunate to have caring adults that understood these dynamics even in the late 90s. So I'm here now, close to my 40s, so 2 days away from my 40s, talking about this is the conversation that companies and organizations need to have, not just young people.
Yeah, I so appreciate that because that's the way, like what you're talking about is really getting, and this is the work that I have really been involved in, like just the thinking about it, but really you're looking at system transformation
Right.
through, like really transforming systems through the work of the individual,
Mm-hmm.
like digging in as an individual, but also really connecting from, so the connection from within and between, and that sets the foundation for transforming systems because that's what's needed in moving forward. So look, we have 8 minutes. I know there was a lot of stuff that you wanted to cover, and there was something you wanted to show. So I'm going to let you decide.
Yeah, I won't show it.
Okay.
I could post it in the. Let me see if I could find something, but it's basically an image that says, how things are as a matter of how they're perceived or perception. It was just an idea about perception. Um, but yeah, so let's make use of these 8 minutes to kind of where are we gonna go from here, right? Like what's that?
I said, where are we going?
Um, let's look at what's happening right now in current news. And for me, when I talk about exploring and getting to know more about my Asian and Vietnamese identity, um, I mean that, and and it's an ongoing process. Rewind back a little bit. When we look at conflict and how conflict shows up between either individuals or affinity groups, or even in the workplace, right? We have to. I encourage people to experience conflict like, what can I learn from this other person that I'm having conflict with,
Mm-hmm.
rather than
Mm-hmm.
I'm so upset with this person that they don't even see where I'm coming from. And so the emphasis is on what can I spew on to other people,
Mm-hmm.
right? What, I don't know if it's spew, because we believe in our convictions, right? Like, we're convicted in what we believe, and therefore we are eager to present it. What I'm saying is, consider suspending that passion and really digging deeper into, what is this person trying to tell me right now? And can I learn something from this person's passion, right? And I hopefully hopefully you can get something out of that. So back to what I'm experiencing now in this moment in time. Not even a week ago was the shooting in Georgia, Atlanta, Georgia, where a white shooter hit up a massage spa, and killed eight people, six of them being Asian women, and now the um, I guess the hashtag is Stop Asian Hate, right? Stop AAPI hate, and I I'm heartbroken by all of it. I'm 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 I understand that there is an increase in violence among Asian people. What I noticed in observing the conversations of this massacre, this situation, this incident, this you know thing, uh, it it becomes part of this greater conversation of, is this targeted strictly on Asian people? Are we putting aside the Black Lives Matter conversation? I'm not quite sure what's going on, right? So when we become part of this segmented, we are separating some of these issues as if they're not one of the same issue. And so what I'm noticing now is this idea that what I was saying, we have to look at, yes, how am I being affected by the situation? And is it so, how do I express this frustration in a way that doesn't take away from other truths? And so when I see that there is a need for allyship, alliance building, and I'm seeing that there is dialogue to say, well, there's resistance in that, and maybe this question of, why isn't there more allyship? Why isn't there more alliance building and coalition building? And then the frustration becomes, well, you're not down for my cause, so why should I be down for your cause? And it's like, oh my gosh, that becomes the narrative rather than the narrative of, this is wrong. How do we stop it and keep it from happening to any of us? And that's the message that I'm trying to figure out how to tell more tactfully, how to present, because even for me, struggling with my own Asian identity, I don't know how to bring that up in a lot of spaces, because it is kind of stop Asian hate. And I'm saying stop all hate, period. How do we work together? And so I hope that the work that I've done up until this point in my life, people who ride with me, people that I ride with, we understand that this is a lot bigger than 2020 and 2021 with the rise of violence among Asian people, but we shouldn't stop there. We should not isolate this conversation to, highlight specifically Asian American, violence. It is across the board. At any given moment, groups of people can be targeted. And we do need to be aware of the channels that pump these narratives out. That's really how I'm trying to move forward, and using the power of language to kind of unite rather than divide. And so hopefully we can continue having this dialogue just in the channels that we have at our reach, whether it's at the dinner table, whether it's in the workplace, whether it's at happy hour. And so having the conversations about what can we do, and not what can I do or what can you do, it's what can we do.
And I think, what's resonating with me as part of the answer, I think, is what you talked about with math, with your math spoken word, is that it's that problem solving, the collective problem solving, this diversity of thought, like it's the we. There has to be a very intentional, inclusive we to get to those next steps. in and really, I think, in the hope that we can have a better world, one that isn't fueled by hate, and that like you talked about the narrative, that is not the narrative that's being pushed. Our time is up. I cannot believe it. We're like exactly.
Yeah. Do you have room for me to close out with a poem, or is this pretty much a hard stop?
Do it. Nope. Do it.
Okay.
I'm gonna myself. Give me a second. Okay.
Cool. This poem was written in 2008, and I feel that it still applies. It is a love letter. I believe that we are meant to be together. Something tells me that the dream of us just might be difficult to manifest into destiny. It's hard to believe in dreams when reality soaks in and it's raining on parades that march in the face of captive audiences. They applaud the idea of us, but the thought of us slips their minds as we pass between lines of doubt and cynicism, and the skepticism is contagious because I too am plagued with sketchy images of caricatured fallacy. So am I falling for a false hope of the United States of a marriage-type relationship? Perhaps my visions of happy matrimony are distorted from bearing witness to adulterated behavior. But regardless of the random rumors that surround us every day, I still can't help but feel that your mass appeal was meant for me. And maybe my jealous tendencies are playing make-believe and tricked me into thinking I'm being pawned as another fallen soldier with a wounded heart and scars that mark a lifetime of verbal battle. So I'm trying to forget about our past disputes and grow up our differences. And I know it's difficult. When you tell me that you love me, I want to believe you. Even though I got tainted thoughts of you only playing mainstream and catering to foreign policies that never bothered to see what you mean to me. So I want to believe that you love me the way love was meant to be, unconditional, without restrictions or limitations and boundless barriers that distract us from being us. So I want to reinvest in the possibility of us. I went about it all wrong at first when I bought a 2-bedroom, 2.5 bath in an affluent neighborhood just so I could fit in with your desires. I give a portion of my well-being, of my wages to your well-being each paycheck, but each day gets more demanding. And honestly, I can't stand seeing your financial hardship while knowing your history of impulsive expenses spent on credit. And I wish I could rescue you from recession with bailout funds, but I bought a Toyota instead. Because at $2 to $4.50 a gallon and your economy falling, somehow I knew I'd be driving the extra miles just to give up with you. So I want to stop flattering with false feelings of infatuation and believe in love again, instead of inaccurate accusations of getting in. You see, I want to provide stimulus packages to your heart so our souls can send a rebuilt infrastructure left over from a corrupt foundation, but I need you to support me whenever I get weak, in sickness and in health, even when I'm not covered with Kaiser from full-time benefits. So how about we resuscitate this relationship and be each other's life support? How about we strengthen our hearts and exercise more on our First Amendment rather than our right to remain silent? I'm trying to mend our wrongs and write them into the Declaration of Us so that we proudly pledge allegiance under a God who knows the truth of how we came to be. So let me protect your honor. All I ask is that you don't treat me like a foreigner or a criminal or illegal or a virus or question my dedication to you. See, I need you to accept me for my entire identity as I have accepted yours because I believe in us, despite my insecurity, in spite of other opinions, and regardless of a far from flawless past. So how about we disregard this past and perfect our future? There's hope for us if you believe in the dream. I love you, America. So love me, or love me not. My name is Viet Mai. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you. Good night, everybody. Thank you for being with us. You can connect with Viet at www.vietmai.com. And Sophia, Luna saying good night. So I'll see you on Wednesday. Please know that you're loved and cared for always. Good night.
Good night.